Hey there! Before we dive into today's story, remember to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you want to join me on this amazing language learning journey. Click the notification bell too so you won't miss any of our future lessons and stories. Also, I'd love to hear about your own English learning experiences in the comments below. Now, let me share with you a story that changed my life forever. Hi there. I'm Sarah Anderson, and I'm about to share a story that changed not only my life, but the lives of countless others in ways I never imagined. Before we dive in, I want you to know that this isn't just another teaching story. It's a journey about connection, understanding, and the power of learning through real-life experiences. As I walked down Hanover Street in Boston's North End this morning, the aroma of freshly baked bread and espresso fills the air, and I can't help but smile. This neighborhood has become my second home, but it wasn't always this way. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in suburban Massachusetts, and I've always been fascinated by the way language connects people. I guess I got that from my grandmother, who came from Ireland barely speaking English. She taught me something invaluable. Communication is more about heart than perfect grammar. That lesson stuck with me and eventually shaped everything I do as a teacher. When I first unlocked the door of the Community Learning Center on Salem Street that September morning in 2008, I had no idea what was waiting for me. From the outside, it wasn't much. Just another brick building in Boston's oldest residential neighborhood. But those hand-drawn welcome signs in various languages taped to our windows, they represented something special. Hope, dreams, and new beginnings. I'd spent 5 years teaching English in traditional language schools before this, following textbooks and rigid curricula. But something always felt off. My students could ace their grammar tests but would freeze up when ordering coffee at the local cafe. They could recite rules perfectly but panic when someone asked them for directions. I knew there had to be a better way. That's why I chose the North End, with its vibrant mix of old-world charm and immigrant energy. Here, Italian grandmothers still call down from third-floor windows, and restaurant owners chat in animated mixtures of English and their native languages. This neighborhood held the key to what would become my teaching revolution. As I arranged the chairs that first morning, I noticed her, a woman peering through our window, clutching a wrinkled flyer advertising free English classes. The hesitation on her face told a story I would soon come to know well. That woman was Maria, and little did I know she would become not just my first student, but the catalyst for a teaching method that would transform countless lives. Join me on this journey, and I'll show you how it all unfolded. I'll never forget my first conversation with Maria. After watching her hesitate at the window, I walked outside to greet her. "Would you like to come in?" I asked with my warmest smile. She clutched her flyer tighter and responded in a barely audible voice. "My English. It's not good." Maria owned a small Italian restaurant just 2 blocks away, a place that had been in her family for 3 generations. She told me her story in a mixture of broken English and expressive hand gestures that I would come to know so well. Her grandmother had opened the restaurant in the 1950s, and now it was her turn to carry on the legacy. But something was holding her back, the language barrier that kept her confined to the kitchen, afraid to interact with English-speaking customers. "Every day I hide," she confessed, her eyes downcast. "My daughter, she takes orders. My son, he speaks to suppliers. Me? I cook, I clean, I stay in back. The frustration in her voice was palpable. Here was a talented chef and business owner who couldn't fully participate in her own restaurant's daily life. During our first assessment session, I discovered that Maria's English skills weren't as basic as she thought. She knew plenty of words, ingredients, cooking terms, numbers for prices and measurements. But her fear of making mistakes was paralyzing. When I asked her to role-play a simple interaction with a customer, she physically took a step back, her hands trembling slightly. "What scares you the most?" I asked her. "They speak so fast," she replied. "And when I don't understand, they look, how you say, disappointed? I feel stupid, like I don't belong in my own restaurant." That moment hit me hard. Maria's challenge wasn't just about learning English, it was about reclaiming her dignity and her place in the community she'd been part of for decades. The traditional teaching methods I'd been trained in suddenly seemed inadequate. Vocabulary lists and grammar exercises weren't going to help Maria greet her customers with confidence or handle a complaint with grace. I began to realize that we needed to completely rethink our approach. As Maria shared more about her daily struggles, the phone calls she avoided, the customer reviews she couldn't read, the food critic she feared, an idea started forming in my mind. What if we could turn her restaurant into our classroom? What if every interaction could become a learning opportunity? "Maria," I said, "I have a different kind of lesson plan in mind for you, but I need you to trust me." She looked uncertain but nodded. That nod would lead us both down a path neither of us expected, towards a teaching method that would eventually revolutionize how we think about language learning. As we wrapped up that first session, Maria paused at the door. "Teacher," she said, turning back to me with determination in her eyes, "I want to take my restaurant back." Those words would become our mission statement, not just for Maria, but for every student who would follow in her footsteps. That night, after my session with Maria, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the textbooks sitting on my shelf. Expensive, colorful books filled with generic dialogues about airports and shopping malls. None of them addressed what Maria really needed: the confidence to be herself in English. The next morning, I arrived at her restaurant before opening hours. The look of surprise on her face when I walked into her kitchen wearing an apron still makes me smile. "Today," I announced, "this is our classroom." I started by asking Maria to show me her morning routine. As she moved through the kitchen, checking inventory and preparing for the day, I noticed how her entire demeanor changed. Here, in her element, she was confident and graceful. She knew every ingredient, every tool, every process. She just didn't know how to express it in English. "Let's start here," I said, picking up various items from her prep station. "But instead of memorizing words, I want you to tell me stories about these ingredients." I held up a bunch of fresh basil. Maria's eyes lit up as she began telling me about her grandmother's secret recipe for pesto, stumbling through the English but never stopping. Without realizing it, she spoke for 5 minutes straight, in English. That was my first breakthrough understanding. Language flows naturally when we're talking about things we're passionate about. Traditional teaching methods often get this backwards, forcing students to learn vocabulary they might never use while ignoring the words they desperately need. We spent that first week creating what I called Kitchen English, a personalized vocabulary list built entirely around Maria's daily life. We labeled everything in her kitchen with both English and Italian names. We practiced common phrases she'd need with suppliers. The delivery is late. These tomatoes aren't ripe enough. I need to change my order. But the real innovation came when we started role-playing with actual restaurant scenarios. I brought in other teachers from the Learning Center to act as customers, and we created real-life situations Maria would face. We practiced everything from taking reservations to handling complaints, but with a twist. After each interaction, Maria would teach us how to make a simple Italian dish. This exchange of knowledge did something remarkable. It shifted the power dynamic. Maria wasn't just a student struggling with English. She was an expert sharing her craft. I watched her confidence grow with each lesson. When she could connect English words to her expertise in the kitchen, they stuck in her memory naturally. We faced challenges, of course. There were moments of frustration when a word wouldn't come, or when a practice interaction went wrong. But we developed strategies for these moments too. We created a small phrase book specifically for her restaurant, with common questions and responses. We practiced recovery phrases for when she didn't understand something. Could you say that more slowly, please? Or, let me check that with the kitchen. The most powerful moment came 2 weeks into our new approach. A food critic walked into the restaurant. Not a planned part of our lessons, but a real one. Maria later told me how she started to panic, but then remembered our practice sessions. She greeted him in English, confidently explained the day's specials, and even shared a brief story about her grandmother's recipes. The critic left impressed, not just with the food, but with the personal touch Maria provided. That evening, as we sat down to review the interaction, Maria wasn't just learning English anymore. She was using it to share her story, her passion, and her heritage. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. What started as a customized solution for one restaurant owner would soon grow into something much bigger, changing not just how we taught English, but how we thought about language learning itself. The success with Maria's initial progress energized us both. But we knew the real test would come from sustained daily interactions with customers. I started spending my evenings at her restaurant, not just as a teacher but as an observer and guide, watching how our method worked in real-world situations. Let me share one of our most memorable learning moments. It was a busy Friday evening, and a customer had a severe garlic allergy, something that needed to be communicated clearly to the kitchen. In the past, Maria would have called her daughter to handle this situation. Instead, I watched from a corner table as she navigated the conversation. "Let me make sure I understand correctly," Maria said, using one of our practice safety phrases. "You are allergic to garlic?" After the customer confirmed, she continued, "I will personally prepare your meal without any garlic. Would you like our special pasta with olive oil, fresh basil, and cherry tomatoes?" The interaction wasn't perfect. Maria's accent was still strong, and she took her time forming sentences. But it was clear, professional, and most importantly, effective. The customer left happy and safe, and Maria was beaming with pride. We built our lessons around these real experiences. Each morning before the restaurant opened, we'd review situations from the previous day. "Remember the couple who wanted to know about wine pairings?" I'd ask. "Let's practice more vocabulary about our wine list." We turned every challenge into a learning opportunity. I developed what I called the restaurant rhythm method. it broke down restaurant service into predictable patterns. Welcome and seating, specials and drinks, taking orders, check-ins and problem-solving, bill and farewell. For each pattern, we created a bank of useful phrases and practiced them until they became natural. But more than just memorizing phrases, we focused on understanding the subtle cultural aspects of American dining customs. Maria learned that when Americans say everything's fine, it might not always mean they're completely satisfied. She became adept at reading body language and asking follow-up questions. One of our most successful innovations was what we called story cards. Each dish on her menu had a card with its ingredients, preparation method, and a brief family story. Maria practiced telling these stories until she could share them naturally with interested customers. These weren't just language exercises. They were opportunities for her to connect with her guests on a personal level. "You know," Maria told me one evening as we were reviewing the day's interactions, "now I don't just cook the food. I can tell its story. When I tell customers about my grandmother's recipes, I see in their eyes they understand this is not just a restaurant, it's my family's heart." We also tackled challenging situations head-on. I brought in friends to role-play difficult customers, those who spoke too quickly, complained about prices, or had complicated dietary restrictions. Each scenario helped build Maria's confidence in handling unexpected situations. Phone calls, which had once been her biggest fear, became a daily practice. We recorded her voicemail greeting together, practiced taking reservations, and worked on clarifying details over the phone. "The secret," I told her, "is not to aim for perfection, but for clear communication." As weeks turned into months, I watched Maria transform from someone who hid in the kitchen to a confident restaurant owner who greeted her customers warmly in English. She still made grammatical mistakes, and some words still challenged her, but she had developed something more valuable than perfect English. She had found her voice. The most rewarding moment came when I overheard her teaching one of her kitchen staff the same confidence-building techniques we had practiced together. That's when I knew our method wasn't just working. It was spreading naturally through the community, creating a ripple effect I had never anticipated. Word spreads quickly in a close-knit neighborhood like the North End. Soon after Maria's success story became visible, other business owners started showing up at our community center with similar hopes and challenges. There was Marco, the barber who wanted to chat with his customers during haircuts. Li Wei, who ran a small grocery store and needed to communicate with suppliers. And Elena, a talented seamstress who dreamed of discussing design ideas directly with her clients. Each of them had unique needs, but they all shared Maria's initial fear, the anxiety of not being able to fully express themselves in English. I began adapting our restaurant rhythm method for different businesses. The barbershop became a hub for learning conversational English. After all, what better place to practice small talk? Li Wei's grocery store turned into a laboratory for learning product names, quantities, and customer service phrases. Elena's alterations shop provided the perfect setting for learning vocabulary about fabrics, colors, and clothing styles. But what amazed me most was how these business owners started supporting each other. They formed an informal network, meeting after business hours to practice English together. Maria, now confident in her own abilities, became a mentor to newcomers. She would tell them, "If I can do it, you can too." It's not about being perfect. It's about connecting with people. The impact on the neighborhood was remarkable. Shops that had once relied on handwritten signs in native languages now featured bilingual displays. Business owners who had previously depended on their children for translation were now handling customer interactions independently. The whole atmosphere of the neighborhood began to shift. There was a new sense of confidence and community pride. One of my favorite success stories was watching Li Wei negotiate with an English-speaking supplier for the first time. He had prepared diligently, practicing phrases about product quality and pricing. When the supplier left, Li Wei turned to me with tears in his eyes and said, "Today, I am truly the owner of my business." These transformations went far beyond language skills. Each small victory in English communication became a step toward fuller participation in the community. Children whose parents took our classes told me how proud they were to see their mom or dad speaking English with customers. The language barrier that had once divided the neighborhood was slowly dissolving, replaced by a web of new connections and friendships. As I watched our little community grow and change, I realized we had stumbled upon something much bigger than a language teaching method. We were building bridges, not just between languages, but between people, cultures, and generations. What started as English lessons soon blossomed into something I never expected, a cultural renaissance in our little corner of Boston. The confidence our students gained in speaking English opened doors to sharing their own cultural heritage more boldly and proudly than ever before. I remember the day Maria suggested hosting what she called story dinners at her restaurant. These weekly events combined language learning with cultural exchange. Customers would come not just for the fantastic Italian food, but to hear Maria share tales of her family's history, traditional recipes, and life in the old country, all in her now confident English. These dinners inspired others. Soon, Li Wei was organizing tea ceremonies at his grocery store, explaining the significance of each gesture and ingredient to fascinated English-speaking customers. Elena began hosting small workshops where she taught both sewing techniques and shared stories about traditional clothing from her homeland. Marco's barbershop became known as the place where you could learn about Italian soccer while getting a haircut. The beauty of these cultural exchanges was how they transformed the power dynamic. Our English learners were no longer just students struggling with a new language. They were cultural ambassadors, experts sharing their heritage with eager listeners. The more they shared, the more confident they became in their English skills. What touched me most was watching the ripple effect in families. Children who had once been embarrassed by their parents' broken English were now proudly bringing friends to family businesses. "My mom makes the best pasta in Boston," Maria's daughter told me one day, and now everyone can hear her story in her own words. The neighborhood's annual street festival that year became a testament to our progress. Instead of separate cultural groups sticking to their own corners, there was a beautiful mixing of languages, foods, and traditions. I watched as Maria confidently explained Italian cooking techniques to a group of tourists, while nearby, Li Wei taught others how to use chopsticks, all of them communicating effortlessly in English. These connections went deeper than language. They showed us that when we break down communication barriers, we don't just learn new words, we discover the rich tapestry of human experience that makes our community unique. Each conversation became a bridge, each shared story a thread in a growing web of understanding. Looking back at Maria's journey still fills me with joy. That timid woman who once peered through our window is now one of the North End's most celebrated restaurant owners. Her restaurant, once struggling to attract English-speaking customers, has become a must-visit destination featured in several Boston food magazines. What makes me most proud isn't just her improved English, it's how she's transformed as a person. Last week I watched her give a cooking demonstration at a local food festival, explaining her grandmother's recipes to a crowd of over 50 people. Her English isn't perfect, but her confidence is unshakable. She's even started mentoring other restaurant owners who are just beginning their English learning journey. The numbers tell part of the story. Her restaurant's revenue has doubled, and she's had to hire additional staff to handle the increased business. But the real success lies in the little moments. The way she jokes with regular customers, her ability to handle phone reservations with ease, and how she personally greets food critics with her warm smile and engaging stories. Maria's family dynamic has changed too. Her children, who once handled all customer interactions, now proudly watch their mother run every aspect of the business. "My mom," her daughter told me recently, "she's not just a great chef anymore. She's a true businesswoman." The transformation hasn't just been professional, it's been deeply personal. Maria often tells new students, "When you find your voice in English, you find a new part of yourself." Her story has become an inspiration for others in our community, proving that it's never too late to grow, learn, and transform. As I walk through the North End today, I see the living legacy of what we started. Every confident conversation, every cultural exchange, every small business thriving. They're all testaments to the power of breaking down language barriers. Our community center has grown, and our teaching method has spread to other neighborhoods in Boston. But more importantly, we've shown that learning English isn't just about mastering grammar or memorizing vocabulary. It's about finding your voice and sharing your story. To those of you watching who might be hesitating, just like Maria once did at our window, take that first step. Your journey to English fluency isn't just about learning a language. It's about unlocking your full potential, sharing your gifts with the world, and becoming part of a larger story. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. Your story starts now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more stories in English and lessons. Click the bell icon to be notified when we post new videos. Your support means a lot to us. See you next time.